What is next for the UFC 155-pound lightweight division? There's been some big fights recently. Dan Hooker versus Paul Felder, of course, is what I'm talking of. There's some big fights to come in the near future, and there's some fights happening in rumours with McGregor versus Gaethje. Let's talk about what I want to see next in the UFC lightweight division, because right now, people should be looking to sign fights and sign them rapidly, because everything's about to kick off before the end of 2020, and a clear-cut top contender will be destined for Khabib Nurmagomedov. We'll see what happens. These are the fights I want to see. We've got Khabib versus Tony Ferguson. First of all, Alhamdulillah, praise Jesus, I want to see that fight. Even though we know that fight's happening, I still want to talk about the fact that it's not happened yet, and I want to see it. And hopefully, with all the fallouts that we've had recently, we can get a prey and a payback at Khabib versus Ferguson happening. So we're looking forward to it. I'm not even going to jinx it anymore. Khabib versus Ferguson. Let's move on. Dustin Poirier is looking for an opponent. I don't believe that it should be Al Iaquinta, I'll be honest with you guys. Al Iaquinta is number 10, number 9 in the division, coming off some losses recently. I don't think it should be him. He's coming off losses. We don't reward the number 9 guy in the division with the top contender. When a top contender loses, sometimes you can do loss for loss if there's another guy that's coming off a loss in the top 5, like McGregor versus Cerrone. But when you're drooping as low as 9, you just don't do it. Whitaker comes off a loss to Adesanya, signs a fight with Jared Cannonier. You know? That's just what you do. You take fights with streaking contenders. Cody Garbrandt loses his title shot against TJ Dillashaw the second time, takes on Pedro Munoz. Dangerous contender. You don't stoop as low as number 9. I don't think it should work like that, because otherwise we're going to propel Al Iaquinta above Dan Hooker in the rankings, which doesn't make any sense at all, to be honest with you. So let's leave that one out. Dustin Poirier versus Dan Hooker needs to happen. It just does need to happen. They need to pay Dustin Poirier what he is owed, and Dustin Poirier versus Dan Hooker needs to take place in the feature fight in June of UFC Australia. UFC 251. I'm looking forward to it. That's the fight I want to see happen. We will have Volkanovski versus Holloway's rematch. Shevchenko versus her next victim. Joanne Calderwood is her name. And then Dan Hooker versus Dustin Poirier. Done. With a sprinkle of Jimmy Crute, Taito Ivasa, Brad Riddell, Kai Kara France in and out of the card. You're talking business there. That's an amazing card. Let's just solidify. Give Poirier what he's worth. He's a big name now. As much as people... a lot of people don't realise how big of a name Dustin Poirier is, but he's been in some major fights. Him versus Khabib in Abu Dhabi was a hugely trending fight. He has 1.3 million Instagram followers. Start paying him what he's worth, because when he shows up on a card... Listen, if you're paying Holloway, Volkanovski, Shevchenko, Calderwood, Poirier Hooker brings more to that card. Even though it's a Volkanovski-Holloway rematch, people aren't that highly anticipated about it. If you put Poirier versus Hooker on the card, you immediately bring the international appeal to the card. I feel as though that's what they should do in Australia. Let's reward Dan Hooker. Let's not reward Al Iaquinta, who lost to Dan Hooker 2 fights ago for Dan Hooker. Why would we do that? That makes no sense. Dan Hooker versus Dustin Poirier should take place next. I don't mind Dan Hooker's chances. Dustin Poirier is expecting another KO soon. His chin seems to work in seasons, if I'm honest with you. I worry for him against Dan Hooker. I feel like Dan Hooker's proved himself as the top of the new breed. I still think he won the UFC Auckland fight. You can argue with me all you want. I think he won the UFC Auckland fight. And the numbers start to prove it the more that we hear about the recounts. Dan Hooker versus Dustin Poirier should be next. Then, Conor McGregor versus Justin Gaethje is what I want to talk about. That's the fight I need to see right now. I will not accept McGregor's chances against Khabib in a rematch, or Ferguson. Let's not get ahead of ourselves here, because we know Ferguson can win that fight. I may even pick Ferguson to win that fight. I don't want to see McGregor get a title shot unless he's shown to have one more contender fight and be a little bit more active, because I think it will make the title shot more interesting. I'm not hating on McGregor here. People know, if you watch the channel, you know I'm anything but a McGregor hater. I just want to see him on form. We saw 40 seconds against Donald Cerrone. What does that tell us? He still hits hard? Okay. I want to see his cardio. I want to see him have a bit of a longer fight. Maybe draw it out into the second round. Let's see him face Justin Gaethje. Dangerous opponent. Big name. Big money fight. And establish yourself as the top contender. If he beats Gaethje, no one will argue with him about getting a title shot. If he beats Gaethje, he will gain all respect back, I'm sure, from the hardcore MMA fans. Unless they're Khabib dick riders, of course. But he will gain a lot of respect if he fights Gaethje next. And he will. I think he will take the Gaethje fight. I think that will happen in August in Dublin, Ireland. There's no way they would announce a Dublin event in the summer and then say that they want to see McGregor versus Gaethje in the summer and not make Conor McGregor on the Dublin card. They're going to turn it into a pay-per-view because UFC 246 was a fight night before it was a pay-per-view and McGregor stepped in. Let's make the fight. McGregor versus Gaethje. Gaethje's got the leg kicks. That's going to be a problem. I feel as though McGregor would win that fight. I'll be honest with you guys, and I'm going to say it, and I feel like more and more people seem to believe that. I wouldn't be surprised if McGregor opens as the favourite here. Gaethje's been out for a very long time, and if we're talking August for a fight, Gaethje will have been out for near enough a year at that point. You know? And the big equation for McGregor coming back against Cerrone was ring rust. He's proved that that's not real for him. He doesn't feel any ring rust whatsoever. Justin Gaethje's been out for a very long time and he's there to be hit. And I worry about that, to be honest with you. I feel as though Conor McGregor would win the fight against Justin Gaethje and then earn himself the title shot. And we'll see what happens with Dustin Poirier and Dan Hooker. Dustin Poirier could win, in which case no one gets a title shot. Dan Hooker could win, in which case there's going to be an argument for a title shot, I'm sure, but that will probably go to Conor McGregor, as we know. He'll go to the Khabib rematch. But maybe, who knows? Khabib might lose to Ferguson. And we get Khabib versus Conor, if Conor beats Gaethje. And then we get Ferguson as the champion versus Dan Hooker or Dustin Poirier. Who knows what's going to happen? Anything could happen. Gaethje could beat McGregor. Who knows? Those are the fights I want to see. Dustin Poirier, Dan Hooker. Conor McGregor, Justin Gaethje. Tony Ferguson, Khabib, alhamdulillah. Let's pray to God. Paul Felder should take some time off. He's the only guy I'm going to put on the subs bench here, to be honest with you guys. He needs to take some time. And I'm being deadly serious here. He needs to take a little bit of time off. A fight I would like to see, other than that, I know that, what's his name? Anthony Pettis. Jesus Christ, he hasn't fallen off that far. I know that Anthony Pettis has kind of fallen off recently. He should be taking on a Dan Hardy fight. I feel like that's a fight that they're going to eventually agree on. Dan Hardy versus Anthony Pettis. Doesn't make a lot of sense, but either way, it's a good fight to make. Two big names. Put it as the co-main event of a fight night. People would watch. Good fight. But with Donald Cerrone, I don't think the Pettis rematch is in his horizon. I feel like he's going to have to take on a ranked contender. And Pettis isn't ranked. I feel like the great fight that could happen would be Donald Cerrone versus Ally Quinter, a rematch. They're both in similar situations. Were coming towards the top of the division. Now we're on a bit of a downward spiral. Donald Cerrone versus Ally Quinter is an amazing fight. 6 versus 9. That makes more sense than Ally Quinter versus Dustin Poirier. Let's make it happen. Both guys coming off losses. Similar positions. Cerrone's beating him. I don't care if the rematch is happening a little bit quickly. I wouldn't mind the fight. And let's face it. It's not like these are two young, hungry up-and-comers. And we don't want to waste the rematch now. These guys are going to retire soon. Within the next few years, I'm sure. Let's use up the rematch while we still can. Because who knows what happens in the next fight. And maybe they're just lost off the face of the planet. It was a good fight the first time. Donald Cerrone versus Ally Quinter. Winnable for both. Let's see it happen. And I want to see it happen in the middle of the year. Who knows when. Starting next up. Kevin Lee versus Charles Oliveira is happening. If Kevin Lee wins, I would love to see him get Islam Makhachev. But what I want to see is not Makhachev sit out on the sidelines. He could do it, but he's going to lose a little bit of steam. I want to see him sign a fight very soon. Maybe on the UFC 249 card. Who knows. Maybe in early April. I would love to see it. He needs to get on a card real soon because the UFC are going to Russia in the summertime. And Kevin Lee versus Islam Makhachev would be the perfect headliner. I think Kevin Lee's going to get past Charles Oliveira. I just do. I think he's going to whoop him. I think he's going to finish him very viciously as well in the second round. However, the Makhachev fight would be very interesting because now there's history behind it. And if Kevin Lee beats Charles Oliveira, all of a sudden he's sliding up to number 7. I just burped. He's sliding up to number 7 above Paul Felder. It's a bigger, high-stakes fight. I would like to see Islam Makhachev take a fight, however. There are some great names in the division, and I feel like I'm going to elect this one as the fight to happen next. Diego Ferreira versus Islam Makhachev. Two streaking contenders. Please, can they fight each other? Stop taking on guys ranked below you. You're not going to get any credit for those fights whatsoever. Stop taking on guys coming off losses. Stop taking on Arman Tsarukian, who's making his debut in the UFC in your hometown of Russia. Start taking on some streaking contenders. If you want to get Kevin Lee, let's build up a big fight between you and Diego Ferreira. Amazing fight. Co-main event of a fight night. Easily. Main card of a pay-per-view. Easily. Let's make it. Islam Makhachev. Diego Ferreira. Go to Brazil. UFC 250. On the main card. Then we can build a narrative. If Kevin Lee and Makhachev win those 2 fights, which is a big if, but if they can win those 2 fights, both of them have gone to Brazil to take on a streaking Brazilian contender in Charles Oliveira and Diego Ferreira, and now they want each other, and Kevin Lee's coming to Russia to do it. That's the fight I want to fucking see. Makhachev Ferreira, whilst Kevin Lee fights Charles Oliveira. If Oliveira and Ferreira win, do them versus each other in another Brazilian event, maybe a fight night main event in Brazil. Ferreira versus Charles Oliveira. The winners of both fights will fight each other. Kevin Lee, Charles Oliveira. Islam Makhachev, Diego Ferreira. Fingers crossed we get to see Islam Makhachev versus Kevin Lee. I think we will. Moving on. Al Iaquinta, of course, should fight Donald Cerrone. Paul Felder is on ice. He's on the sidelines. He's still in hospital. I don't want to force anything upon him. I hope he's okay. Actually, I think he's out of hospital. I think he's doing well. But he needs to take some time off for damn sure. So we're out of the equation there. But when he does come back, I don't want to talk about it. It's too far in the future. Fuck it. The whole division's going to be different. And I feel like if Paul Felder sits out for a little bit, it will benefit him. It really will. If Paul Felder sits out for a little bit, things will go well. Because some guy at the top is going to lose again and be in a little bit more of a desperate situation. And he will make the Paul Felder fight. Let's say if Conor McGregor loses to Gaethje next, which is a very viable outcome. That could happen. Gaethje's got a very good chance in the fight of winning. Even though I think he would be an underdog, he's got a very good chance of winning. McGregor's on another loss. He needs someone to get back in there with. He has beef with Paul Felder. They could do that shit. Paul Felder versus Conor McGregor. Paul Felder's a big name right now. A lot of people have... He's exploded in popularity after his performance against Dan Hooker. Even though he lost, he looked very good and it was an amazing fight. Paul Felder versus Conor McGregor if McGregor loses. Or maybe if Dustin Poirier loses to Dan Hooker. Maybe we could see Poirier versus Felder. Maybe if Tony Ferguson loses to Khabib. Now we're talking Tony Ferguson versus Felder. Hold off, Felder. Have a real consideration on what could happen. And see what fights come your way. Stay in the gym, Paul Felder. Heal up soon. I hope he gets back in there soon. And just see what fights happen. Moving on. Edson Barboza is out of the division and out of conversation. Again, moving on. Charles Oliveira is fighting Kevin Lee. Gregor Gillespie should be looking for a fight against a guy coming off a loss just outside the rankings, or maybe a streaking contender, who knows. I feel as though we could go in the direction of Drew Dober versus Gregor Gillespie as the co-main event of a fight night, maybe. I feel like those are 2 big names. They could headline the prelims of a pay-per-view as well. Gregor Gillespie versus Drew Dober sounds like an amazing fight to me, I'll be honest with you guys. Gregor Gillespie coming off 1 loss after a long undefeated streak. Typically, the guys that are undefeated for a while don't face a loser after losing. They still take on a streaking contender. Gregor Gillespie versus Drew Dober would be an amazing fight to have in the middle of the year. I'd love to see it. Let's make it happen. Next up, Alexander Hernandez should take on Arman Tsarukyan. Final. Let's make that happen. Brad Riddell should take on Scott Holtzman, who is also on a 2-fight win streak and a very winnable fight for Brad Riddell. And also Brad Riddell's number 27 in the division. He's 2-0. Maybe not give him the ranked Alexander Hernandez yet. I feel like that's a little bit jumping the gun. Let's pump the brakes, as Uncle Dana would say. But there's some great fights to happen, man. Stephen Ray versus... Maybe there isn't too many good fights. Nasrat Haqparast versus Clay Guida. I don't know, but there's... The lightweight division's a bit of a funky situation right now. Lando Venata, maybe we can do him versus Vince Piquel. Or Joe Lozon versus Lando Venata would also be an amazing fight. I'd love to watch it. Mark Jacasey, if he wins his next fight versus Lando Venata. That could be a great fight. Michael Johnson has got an opponent in Evan Dunham coming up. If Michael Johnson wins that one, maybe we could see a matchup between him and someone with a name in the division. Who knows? Maybe a matchup between him and Trinaldo. That could happen. Leonardo Santos should be looking for a big fight soon. Maybe against... Who knows? Maybe RDA will go back down to lightweight. You never know. Maybe RDA will just shift back down and create a bunch of life in the division. You never know. I just shifted the whole screen off there. That was weird. I've never done that before in a video. Craziness. Every single new video that comes out from me. A crazy twist and turn. You never know what's going to happen in an MMA Guru video, I tell you. Anyway. Cool. Cool stuff. Oh, maybe Anthony Pettis could take on Nasrat Haqparast. Unless he wants to take on Dan Hardy. He should take on Dan Hardy. Dan Hardy versus Anthony Pettis. It's a payday for Pettis, easily. So you should do it, 100%. Moving on. Goodbye. See you later. Great fights to make. Those are the ones I want to see next. Click that button there. Gaethje, I just smacked the microphone. It's all going to shit in my room right now. Gaethje versus McGregor. Poirier versus Hooker. Felder sit out on the sideline and see what happens. And that's all it basically is. Let's hope that we see Kevin Lee versus Islam Makhachev. And yeah, the lightweight division is so fucking good. Honestly, I could sit here and wank to it, but that would be against YouTube's terms of service, of course. So goodbye. I think me just saying that the words wank to it is actually against terms of service. So either way, I'm demonetized. Good stuff. Click that button there. Goodbye.